welcome back. So I'm Shruti, and last class we have discussed with the mechanism of breathing the passage of the respiratory system. So now in this video we are gonna deal with respiratory volume and capacities, how the exchange of gases, that is O2 and CO2, occurs in your body, how the transport of gases, that is O2 and CO2, occurs in the body. So now coming to the respiratory volume and capacities. So coming to the respiratory volume and capacities, first we have is tidal volume. So now what is tidal volume? So tidal volume, it is the amount of air that you breathe in or breathe out. Okay, it is the amount of air that you breathe in or breathe out during the normal respiration. So you have a normal respiration, then during the normal respiration, whatever the amount of air that you either breathe in or breathe out, so that will give you the tidal volume. So on an average, it will be about 500 ml. But if you talk about per minute, it is about 6000 to 8000 ml. Okay. So this is a tidal volume. And if I talk about the normal respiration rate, a human can usually breathe for 12 to 16 times per minute. Okay. On an average, 12 to 16 times. So this is the tidal volume where you have the amount of air that you breathe in or breathe out during the normal respiration. So this is the value, that is 6000 to 8000 ml. Now the next volume is inspiratory respiratory volume. Okay. So now these IRV, what it is you have a normal respiration. Okay. The additional amount of air that you can breathe in. Okay. So the additional amount of air that you can breathe in during the forcible inspiration. Okay, so this is something related to forcible inspiration, right? So the additional amount of air that you can breathe in during the forcible inspiration will give you the IRV. So this value is about 2500 ml to 3000 ml. Now next comes the expiratory reserve volume. So this is opposite to this. Same again here, the additional amount of air that you can exhale out. Okay. Expiratory, that is the additional amount of air that you can exhale out again during the forcible expiration. As it is expiratory, so during the forcible expiration, whatever the amount of extra amount of air that you can exhale out will give you the extra expiratory reserve volume. So this is about 1000 to 1100 ml. Now what is this residual volume? So residual volume, when I talk about it, it is the amount of air that is left in your lungs. Okay. So the amount of air that is left in your lungs after a forcible expiration. So this was about the forcible inspiration. This was about the forcible expiration. This is again the forcible expiration. After you exhale out completely, a forced expiration you are carrying out, and still a little amount of air is left in your body, right? Okay, so the amount of air that is left in your lungs after a forcible expiration will give you this residual volume, and this value is about 1100 to 1200 ml. This is moreover related to like expiratory reserve volumes, hence the values are little similar. Okay, so these volumes, these are the different kinds of volumes. When you combine these different types of volumes or add them, it will lead to certain capacities. Okay. So these are the volumes, different types of volumes. When you add them, it will lead to certain capacities. Now first we will go with the inspiratory capacity. So inspiratory capacity means the capacity how much you can breathe in. So it is the volume of air that can be inspired after a normal expiration. Now you have taken a normal breathing and you have exhaled out. Okay. So once you exhale, what is the amount of air that you can inhale in your body? Okay, so you have left out exhaled out the carbon dioxide, and after that normal expiration, how much amount of air that you can breathe in will give you this inspiratory capacity. So this value can be tidal volume plus IRV. When you club this tidal volume plus IRV, you will get this inspiratory capacity. Okay, so this is about the inspiratory capacity. Now expiratory capacity. How is this expiratory capacity? Is the volume of air. Okay, the volume of air that can be expired after a normal inspiration. Now you have breathed in. Normal inspiration you have taken. So what amount of air you can exhale out from your body? So it is volume of air that can be expired from your body after a normal inspiration. So that will give you the expiratory capacity. So you can get this value by combining this tidal volume plus ERV. Okay. So here you got the inspiratory capacity. You got the expiratory capacity. Now let us move to the functional residual capacity. Now what is this? So the volume, now you are breathing. Okay. So even after you breathe or you exhale, there is some amount of air or the oxygen or the carbon dioxide left in your lungs. So this is dealing with that. The volume of air or the gases which has remained in the lungs after a normal expiration. You have exhaled out. Still some amount of air or the gases which is left in your lungs will give you this functional residual capacity. Do not get confused into volumes and capacities. First you mention about the volumes. When you have the clear idea about the volumes, then you can go for the capacities. Because residual volume is also always something which is giving you the volume of air which is left in your lungs. And functional residual capacity is also something which is giving you the value of volume of air which is left in your lungs. But here you have after forcible expiration, here you have after normal expiration, right? So how do you get this value is when you add this ERV plus residual volume, when you add this two, you will get this functional residual capacity. Now the next is vital capacity. This is a very important thing. So what is vital capacity is maximum amount of air that a person can breathe. Okay. You have after a forcible expiration, you have tried enough to remove all the carbon dioxide which is present in your body. But even after that, the maximum air which you can breathe in. Okay. So maximum amount of air that you can breathe in or that a person can breathe in after the forcible expiration. So this vital capacity, how do you get is when you club this ERV plus tidal volume plus IRV. When you club these three, tidal volume, IRV and ERV, you get the vital capacity. Clear? So these are the four different types of capacities. Now coming to the last and the final capacity, that is the total lung capacity. Now what is total lung capacity? So when I talk about the total lung capacity, it is the total amount of air, okay? Total amount of air which is getting accommodated in your lungs, okay? Total amount of air that is getting accommodated in your lungs at the end of forcible inspiration. Now you have taken the amount of air, a very inspiration like you have breathed in for about 5 to 7 seconds. That is a forcible inspiration. So whatever amount of air is getting accommodated in your lungs after the end of forcible inspiration will give you the total lung capacity. So how do you get this total lung capacity is you have to club this all. That is residual volume, tidal volume, IRV, ERV. When you combine all these four values, you will get this total lung capacity. Clear? So you have total 4 volumes, and after this 4 volume, with the help of this volume, you can get into the inspiratory capacity. What is the expiratory capacity? What is the functional residual capacity? Then vital capacity, then total lung capacity. So with this, we have completed the respiratory volume and the capacities. Now let us move on to exchange of gases. So last class, I have told you exchange of gases occurs at the alveoli, right? Alveoli is forming the exchanging part or the respiratory part of the respiratory system. So alveoli are the major sites of the diffusion, where like O2 and CO2 get diffused between the blood and the atmosphere, right? So between the blood and alveoli is the major site of the diffusion where the exchange of O2 and CO2 occurs between the blood and the tissues. Now what happens? So here you have a structure of alveoli, right? So what this alveoli will does is now to exchange of gases. For any movement to occur, there is a pressure gradient, right? So the pressure gradient is created over here. The exchange of gases occurs due to the presence of the pressure gradient. Now solubility of the gases, that is solubility of O2 and CO2, and the thickness of the membrane. That is that can be alveoli membrane thickness or the tissue membrane thickness. With the help of these two are the factors which will affect the rate of diffusion. Okay. As I have told you, alveoli is a major site of the diffusion of gases, where this is the place where the O2 and CO2 transportation or diffusion occurs. So now these two factors, solubility and thickness, are the two factors will affecting the rate of the diffusion. Now there is a mixture, right? You have O2, you have CO2. Now what to do is, there is a individual pressure created. Pressure gradient I have told you, right? So when I talk about the individual pressure, what is partial pressure? Is the pressure of the individual gases. Okay. So if I talk individual gas, that means the pressure of individual gas means only the pressure of O2, only the pressure of CO2. So the pressure of the individual gases in a mixture of gases is referred to as partial pressure. Now partial pressure of O2 is given by PO2. Partial pressure of CO2 is given by partial pressure of CO2. PO2 and PCO2. Now if I talk about the solubility, thickness is done. So solubility. So solubility of the carbon dioxide, when you compare it with the oxygen, it is 20 to 25 times more. Right? The solubility of CO2, when you compare it with the oxygen, it is 20 to 25 times more, and the diffusion which occurs around the diffusion membrane per unit difference. Okay. So the diffusion of carbon dioxide per your diffusion membrane per unit difference is also higher when compared to the partial pressure of O2. Clear? So this CO2 gets diffused very quickly when you compare it with the partial pressure of oxygen. So in turn, if you talk, all of the factors which are there in our body will directly or indirectly influence the exchange of gases, will directly or indirectly affect the transport of O2 and CO2. Clear? So now let us come to the transport of the gases. So coming to the transport of gases, so respiration occurs O2 and CO2. These are the two major gases which we talk about. So transport of O2 and CO2, how O2 is getting transported? Like O2 is getting transported means there is some method, like how does it reaches the target organs. You are breathing the air, it is getting to nasal passage, trachea, pharynx and all, so on and so. But how does it getting to the target organ? So 97% of the O2 in our body is passed on to the target organ by the RBCs, right? So red blood corpuscles or the red blood cells, they will carry 97% of oxygen to the targeted organ. Okay, and 3% of the O2 is carried out to the tissues in a dissolved state, that is in the plasma state. Okay, so here we complete with the 97 plus 3, 100%. Now if I talk about the carbon dioxide, how carbon dioxide is getting transported. So 20 to 25% of the carbon dioxide is getting transported with the help of RBCs. How they are getting transported to RBCs is they again will bind with the hemoglobin and form a structure called carboaminohemoglobin. So this is 20 to 25%. Now 70% of the carbon dioxide will turn itself into bicarbonate form, and then with once it gets turned to bicarbonate form, then it gets easily transferred to targeted tissues. 7% it occurs in the dissolved state, that is in the plasma state. So here this is how the transport of gases, that is O2 and transport of CO2 occurs. Now if I talk about the individual transport of O2. Okay, so if I talk about the O2, now oxygen major is 97% is carried out by RBCs, right? So coming to the RBCs, they have a red color pigment. RBCs are having a red color pigment which contains iron. They have iron containing red color pigment called as a hemoglobin. Okay, so they have a hemoglobin. Now these hemoglobin, which is a red color pigment iron, so what it does is it will combine with the O2. Hemoglobin gets combined with this O2 and form the oxyhemoglobin, right? So once you have formed the oxyhemoglobin, okay, this O2 is getting combined with the red color pigment called as the hemoglobin and forming the oxyhemoglobin. Now what are the factors influencing this oxyhemoglobin? So first the thing that will influence is majorly the pressure of O2. Partial pressure of O2 is the main thing which will affect this combining of oxyhemoglobin. Then the second factor which will influence is partial pressure of carbon dioxide, also the hydrogen ion concentration and the temperature. Okay, so these are the factors which will influence the binding of oxygen with the hemoglobin. Now once this is done, you have formed the oxyhemoglobin. So after this, once the oxyhemoglobin is formed, so one molecule of hemoglobin will carry 4 molecules of O2. Okay, clear? So these are the factors. This is how it is influencing. One molecule of hemoglobin will carry maximum 4 molecules of O2. So now this is done. Oxyhemoglobin is formed. Now when I plot the graph, okay, so I have told you partial pressure of O2 is getting affected here. It is a major factor which is affecting the formation of oxygen with the hemoglobin, that is oxyhemoglobin. Okay, so this is a factor influencing. When I plot the graph, that is saturation percentage of hemoglobin with O2, and partial pressure of O2. So I'll get a sigmoid curve. Okay, when I plot the graph, that is partial pressure of O2 with the percentage of hemoglobin with the saturation percentage. Okay, so when I plot this, I'll get a sigmoid curve. Okay, so this is also called as the oxygen dissociation curve. Now where you find the hemoglobin formation more and where do you find the hemoglobin formation less? How does these occurs? Now at the alveoli level, where the partial pressure of oxygen is very high, because alveoli are the sites where the oxygen is produced, right? You are getting the oxygen, and finally that oxygen, if I talk about the O2, first it will get into the body, then it will reach to the alveoli, blood, then tissues, right? And if I talk about the CO2, it is tissue, blood, then alveoli, right? So this is a process, reverse, concentration gradient occurs the reverse here. So now this is done. So where you find the formation of oxyhemoglobin more is at the alveoli region. The partial pressure of O2 is relatively higher. So alveoli may, if you have a partial pressure of oxygen more, that means if the oxygen pressure is more, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide will be really less, and the temperature will be less. Hydrogen ion concentration will also be less. The only thing that will be more in the alveoli region is partial pressure of oxygen. Okay, so here it is a place where there is which favors the formation of oxyhemoglobin. So at the alveoli region there is more and more formation of oxyhemoglobin. Clear? Whereas at the tissue level, where you have the pressure of carbon dioxide more and the oxygen pressure is less. So at the tissue level where the partial pressure of oxygen is less, hence that will cause the dissociation of oxyhemoglobin. That means oxygen and hemoglobin are getting separated at the tissues. And at the alveoli region, more and more oxygen gets combined with the hemoglobin. So clear? So this is about the transport of O2. And the point that you should know here is the 100 ml of oxygenated blood. Okay, O2 is oxygenated, right? So 100 ml of oxygenated blood can carry 5 ml of O2. Okay, 100 ml of oxygenated blood has the tendency to carry 5 ml of O2. Okay, to the tissues. In a normal individual, this is the thing what happens. If you are a normal healthy adult, so your body can carry, if you have 100 ml of oxygenated blood in your body, then that can carry about 5 ml of O2 to the target tissues. So this is about the transport of the O2. Now if I talk about the carbon dioxide. So 20 to 25%, as I have told you, the transportation occurs by the RBCs in the form of carbaminohemoglobin. Now same procedure occurs here. As O2 was binding with the RBCs, here also carbon dioxide gets binded with the hemoglobin, and that will form the structure called as carbaminohemoglobin. So 70% of the carbon dioxide get converted to bicarbonate form, and 7% is getting transported in the dissolved state, that is the plasma state. So now what happens over here is, here the pressure of O2 was affecting, right? Here the partial pressure of carbon dioxide will influence the formation of carboaminohemoglobin. Okay? So partial pressure of CO2 will influence this carboaminohemoglobin production. So now where the carboaminohemoglobin production occurs more? So that is at the tissue levels, because at the tissue level I have told you that the partial pressure of CO2 is relatively higher. So to form more and more carboaminohemoglobin, you need more and more partial pressure of carbon dioxide. So that can be found at the tissues. So at the tissue level where the partial pressure of CO2 is relatively more, there you have binding of CO2 more and more with the hemoglobin. And at the alveoli region where the partial pressure of CO2 is less and O2 pressure is more, here the carbon dioxide and hemoglobin dissociation occurs. That means the carbon dioxide will get separated from the hemoglobin. Right? So now from these RBCs, they have an enzyme called as the carbonic anhydrase enzyme. So this enzyme is also found in the plasma as well, but it is present in very little quantity. So now that carbonic anhydrase, what it does is, you have the carbon dioxide and the water. So that will perform the reaction in both the ways. It will occur in reversible way, it will occur in irreversible way. Same like the oxyhemoglobin. Like when oxygen get combined with the hemoglobin, it also has a tendency to react in a reverse way. So similarly, this carbonic anhydrase, what it does is carbonic anhydrase. So you have carbon dioxide and H2O. So at the alveoli region, you are getting this carbon dioxide and the H2O. With the help of this carbon anhydrase, you will get converted to H2CO3. Then the reaction occurs again, and that leads to production of bicarbonate plus the hydrogen ion. Now these bicarbonates are produced at the tissue level. Okay? So these tissue levels are producing bicarbonates and finally reaching the target organ. Okay? The same can be occurred in the reverse way. That is, carbonate is formed again. It will lead to H2CO3, and to dissolve, or to just when you want your body to eliminate carbon dioxide, that will occur at the tissue level. That these H2CO3 get splits into carbon dioxide and water. So once it gets converted to carbon dioxide and water, carbon dioxide is ejected out or expirated out of the body, whereas the H2O is retained in the water. So this is how the transport of carbon dioxide occurs. Now the 100 deoxygenated, carbon dioxide is deoxygenated, right? So 100 ml of deoxygenated blood, okay? So 100 ml of deoxygenated blood has the tendency to carry 4 ml of carbon dioxide to the alveolus, okay? So this is about the transport of O2 and transport of CO2.
Go.
So coming to the regulation of respiration. So now regulation of respiration. So our body, it has the tendency to maintain and moderate the respiratory rhythm, okay? So it can maintain it or it can moderate the respiratory rhythm according to the needs of the body. So whenever your body demands certain changes or moderation, so your body has a tendency to maintain or moderate the respiratory rate according to the situations of the body demands or depending upon the demand of the tissues. So now how this respiratory regulation occurs is, it occurs by neural mechanism. Right? So these neural mechanism, how does it occurs is, you have a respiratory rhythmic center, right? You have respiratory rhythm center. Now these respiratory rhythm center is present in the medulla region, okay? So this respiratory rhythm center, it is present in the medulla region, and the major function of these respiratory rhythm center which is present in the medulla is maintenance of this regulation. The primary function of this respiratory rhythm center is regulation of the respiration. Now you have one more center called as the pneumotaxic center, right? So these pneumotaxic center, it is present in the pons. Now what this center will do is it will moderate whenever your body needs certain moderations in the respiration system. So this is the center responsible for such changes. Now after this pons, you have got these two centers. So now what this pneumotaxic center does is it will reduce the rate of it will reduce the duration or the rate of inspiration. That means the amount of air that you breathe in. So it will reduce that rate and causes alteration in the respiratory rate. Okay. So that will lead to fluctuations in your respiratory rate. So this is the pneumotaxic center function. Whenever your body requires certain time of changes, so this is the center which is responsible. Now after this is done, how the moderations are occurring. You can see this in the neural mechanism. Now there is one more area called as a chemosensitive area. There is this chemosensitive area. It is present adjacent to this respiratory center. So now what is the function of this chemosensitive area is it is highly means it gets highly influenced by the hydrogen ion concentration and the CO2. Okay, so this is highly reactive to hydrogen ions and the carbon dioxide. So whenever there is a certain increase of these hydrogen ions and the carbon dioxide in your blood, in your body, so this what it will do is it will send signals to the respiratory rhythmic center. So then that respiratory rhythmic center will show the remedial actions. Okay, so that will lead to that will produce certain changes in your respiratory system. Okay, so this chemosensitive area is present adjacent to this respiratory rhythmic center, which is highly sensitive to this hydrogen ion and carbon dioxide. So once these are getting stimulated or once that get activated, so then they can send the signals to this respiratory rhythmic center. Then once the center gets activated, it will produce certain amount of changes in your respiratory tract. Now the receptors, okay, receptors from the internal carotid artery or the aortic arch and the internal carotid artery. Now there are certain receptors which are present in the internal carotid artery as well, the aortic arch as well. So even these are like have the tendency to sense the changes in the hydrogen ion concentration as well as in the CO2. So when these level changes, they will recognize these changes and they will also send the signals to the respiratory rhythmic center to so that respiratory rhythmic center will get again activated, and once that get activated, you have remedial actions taking place. That is, your body will perform the moderations in your respiratory tract. So this is how the regulation occurs. Now there are certain disorders, okay, disorders of the respiratory system. So there are very common disorders. If I talk about the asthma, it is the difficulty in breathing and the swallowing, okay, which occurs due to the inflammation of bronchi and the bronchioles. So then you have emphysema, which is a chronic disorder. It mostly occurs, the major cause of the emphysema is cigarette smoking, okay. So here also you have decreased surface absorption, okay. So respiratory exchange of gases absorption, whatever is taking place, that gets reduced. Then you have certain called as pneumonia, which occurs due to streptococcus pneumonia. You also have occupational disorders such as the silicosis, the long time exposure to silica, like people who are working in the silicon factories, those people will get to this silicosis. Then you have certain thing called as asbestosis. You have black lung disease, which is like long time exposure to coal. So these are the various kind of disorders which will affect your respiratory tract. So with this we have completed with this breathing and exchange of gases. So this is how the different kinds of respiratory tract will affect your respiratory system. So in the next video we'll deal with another chapter. Yeah, thank you.